This training video provides guidance for preparing contract time estimates for Kentucky Transportation Cabinet projects with construction cost estimates of greater than $1 million. This video is one of 3 training videos developed for putting these estimates together. Please review the overview video prior to proceeding. Additionally, there is a training video for projects with construction cost estimates of less than $1 million. For ease of reference, we will phrase projects with construction cost estimates of greater than $1 million as large projects. The process for these large projects is actually much simpler than for the smaller projects. This is the result of developing regression-based formulas that, given relatively few user inputs, can provide an estimate in calendar days for the project. These formulas are incorporated into a Microsoft Excel-based spreadsheet and called the Contract Time Determination System. These formulas are based on data from previous projects and provide a range of duration estimates. Additionally, these formulas are divided according to project type, so a fundamental step in the large project process is selecting the appropriate project type. The ease of use comes when the user inputs being quantities that should be readily available to the user. In other words, there is no need to research production rates or other items. Just as with smaller projects, there are various items that must be considered when preparing a contract time estimate for larger projects. The scheduling needs of the project must take into account many variables. Several are listed here, but this is not an all-inclusive list. First, public constraints and inconvenience need to be considered. Is this going to be a project that impacts daily commutes, and if so, to what degree? Are there special events which need to be considered, and will they be drastically impacted by the work? Can work be scheduled to minimize those impacts? Is there access needs that needs to be maintained or maintained by a certain date for school traffic or other reasons? The answers to these questions may impact the proposed letting for a project or may incur constricting the schedule or use of milestones. There also needs to be a clear understanding of the goal of the project. Is it intended to be in place and open for a particular reason? The answers to the previous questions can also affect cost. If there can be flexibility given to the schedule, it is likely that lower project bids will result. On the other hand, if by necessity the schedule is not flexible and needs to be constricted, it is likely that construction costs will escalate. Milestones are a scheduling tool that can be used to have different aspects of the project completed in times varying from the total project completion date. This is something that can be added to the contract and used with these contract time estimates as provided by the tools. However, these tools are not sophisticated enough to include them in the process of preparing a contract time estimate. Including milestones in the contract time will need to be done manually. Another consideration is seasons and weather. Adverse weather in the months from December through March can drastically affect the ability to do work. These items need to be considered. The risk associated with these delays can vary depending on the scheduling contract conditions used. Calendar days, as produced from the large scheduling tool, attempts to account for weather from a historic viewpoint. This contract approach charges contract days regardless of weather. To use working days, a conversion is required to manipulate the contract days into working days through estimating adverse weather days. This type of contracting charges a contractor only when weather conditions allow work on controlling operations. This allows the contractor to shed some risk associated with weather, but is problematic for construction staff to monitor and document. Completion date contracts use calendar days and the anticipated letting date to determine a completion date. Both calendar day and completion date contracts place weather risk on the contractor. For further information related to project scheduling contract requirements, refer to the current Kentucky Standard Specification for road and bridge construction. As mentioned, the steps for completing a contract time estimate for larger projects is fairly simple to follow. First, download the template and open the file. You will need to enable macros to allow the worksheet to function properly, and there should be a button indicating this on the top of the sheet the first time you open the spreadsheet. Once opened, the worksheet must update a cost index, which it does automatically, but you will have to have internet access, and it will take a few seconds. This is necessary because the equations must reverse inflate the construction estimates to account for any price changes over time. Next, input the item number in the appropriate field and save the file as indicated on the opening sheet. All that is left is selecting the appropriate project type by clicking the appropriate button and entering the required quantities. Descriptions of the project type have been included for ease of access. There is also the ability to adjust the working day conversion sheet if you desire, but otherwise you will have your estimated duration. As always, you will need to consider variables specific to your project and seek validation from experienced construction personnel. To reiterate, the most important part of this process is selecting the correct project type. Guidance for that is seen here. There are 5 project types. Limited access for projects essentially using existing alignment but perhaps with minor changes to profile with an overlay. Open access is the reconstruction of a permitted or partially controlled alignment through using existing right-of-way. A new route is a complete new alignment construction of a project. A bridge rehab project may require existing bridge closure or partial closures for widening or deck repairs. And lastly, the bridge replacement, which would include the construction of a new bridge. The project type selection is for the entire project, not piecemeal. So, if there are bridges included in a new route project type, only use the new route formula. In other words, the project type selection is a holistic approach. The equations for the individual project types can be seen here. You may notice that the relatively small number of inputs for these formula, which can be drastically simplified the user's effort. You may notice that the reinforcing variable in the new route formula would account for bridge work, just to reemphasize that these formulas account for all work items within these project types. These formula were developed by regression analysis of historical data, which simplified the equations to only the most meaningful inputs. You may be wondering exactly how the system works. Essentially, the spreadsheet does the most complex work within this method. Completing the input in the yellow fields of the project type spreadsheets will make any necessary adjustments and plug in the factors in the previously discussed equations. There are comments loaded within the spreadsheet to provide assistance when inputting the items in the yellow fields. The range of duration estimates are then output. An additional feature on each sheet is the schedule estimator. This area of the sheet attempts to simplify the user estimates even further by relating the contract time estimate in calendar days, completion date, and working days. It should be noted that the working day calculation was not validated within this research. It is merely an attempt to estimate a conversion of calendar days to working days using the average adverse weather days for Kentucky as a whole. Adjustments can be made to this conversion by adjusting the number of working days per week or the percentage of rainfall or temperature related concerns in the working day calculation tab. At no point should you adjust information in the cost index tab. Additionally, on the sheet are added guidance notes to inform you of the information and how it should be input in the fields. Let's walk through some information before completing a live example. Here's the title sheet for the contract time system. The first time you open the sheet, you will need to enable content, have internet access, and allow a few seconds for it to update. Next, you would input your item number and save the file as the item number for reference. Then you will select your project type from the buttons on the sheet. You will be transferred to the appropriate project sheet where you will input the fields for the regression equation and see the results. After doing this, be sure to save your file. Let's consider a limited access example. This project type requires quantities for earthwork, storm sewer pipe, and the construction estimate. Using the quantities listed in this example and inserting them into the equation, the result is 616 days. which would be considered the mean from this equation. Notice also that the project does not entail excavation or storm sewer, so these fields are 0 or left blank. In comparing to the actual project of this example, it took 544 days. While not exact, the equation is roughly 14% over the actual project and within the range as computed by the program. The range just mentioned can be seen in the program sheet here. This would be the output using the inputs in the previous example. Notice the schedule estimator will use today's date as the proposed letting date until changed by the user. When changing, the fields are automatically updated. From this page, you can now save the file and print the sheet for project records. This will print to the default printer unless you select a different printer in Microsoft Excel first. Let's try the live example using the same figures. The first time that we open the spreadsheet, you will notice the Enable Content button. Clicking that will allow the spreadsheet to run and update the cost indices, also allowing the macros to allow the buttons to operate on each sheet. I will now input the item number for this project. As you can tell, hovering over the yellow fields for entry points also highlight comments that will guide you through the spreadsheet. Here, I will input 12-1234.00. That will incorporate that item number throughout the spreadsheets, no matter which of the project types I choose. I can now go to step 2 and save the file as the item number for reference. Next, since I'm going to be doing a limited access project type, I will click that button. That transfers me to the limited access duration sheet. You will notice that the item number has already been incorporated. The only fields that I need to input information in are the yellow fields. Each one is commented for guidance. Also, you'll notice the worksheet notes will give me informational notes on how to use the spreadsheet and any concerns I may have. By clicking this box, I can also email questions to KYTC CAD support. So for the next inputs on the limited access duration, I have the inputs of construction estimate, roadway excavation, and storm sewer. For each of these equations were developed using existing data, all of which had certain ranges. As you can see, in this particular formula, the construction estimate ranged from $1 million to $50 million. Inputting values outside of that range could produce undesirable results. The final step for any estimate developed by these spreadsheets is to run them by an experienced project management staff member. Inputting the data from the previous example, I'm going to enter $52,356,675 in the construction cost estimate. Also for this example, we will be putting in 0 cubic yards for roadway excavation and 0 linear feet for the storm sewer. Using one of the 3 fields is completely acceptable. The next part of the spreadsheet for the contract time estimating tool to consider is the schedule estimating area. The schedule estimator was a tool added and was not validated according to the research. In this tool, you may input any date proposed for the anticipated letting date. By doing so, the estimated completion date field will automatically update. The estimating working days, again, is built from the average adverse working days for the state of Kentucky. Use the working days calculations with care. The calendar days and completion dates are considered more robust. If, by chance, you would like to adjust the calendar working days or the adverse working day averages, you can simply go to the Working Day Calc spreadsheet and adjust the number of working days per week, the percentages of rainfall or percentages of temperature issues to adjust the average days per month that are adverse by those conditions. One other project type to note is the new route duration spreadsheet. Within this spreadsheet, there are 5 parameters to enter fields for the duration formula. If you have looked at the equations, you will notice that steel reinforcement, granular embankment, perforated pipe, and pavement striping each have negative coefficients. What this means is that while the construction estimate will add days to the duration estimate, the remaining 4 will reduce those days. This is a function of having fewer projects to develop this formula. Using this formula, it is possible that a negative duration could result from the spreadsheet. What this means is that care must be taken when using the new route formula spreadsheet and making sure that you get experienced project management staff to review the duration and not just accepting it at face value. Again, once you have completed your inputs into the project type spreadsheet you're using, and you've input your proposed letting date, you can click the print button to print to your default printer and save the file to your project files to have these as records. One last aspect to reiterate is the schedule estimator. Again, as seen on the Working Days Calc tab, weather is taken into account, but adverse weather days are merely averaged for these estimations. Consider the anticipated letting date and fewer working days available in December through March when using these numbers. Once you have completed the contract time estimate, there are some final considerations. Consider local events, needed milestones, and other variables on the screen. Also consider the project needs. Does the estimate make sense given any weather concerns, especially in terms of the anticipated letting date, public inconvenience, or other requirements? Always validate the contract time estimate and proposed contract time method with experienced construction personnel. If there are any changes, such as the anticipated letting date, make sure that you reevaluate the schedule and update all the duration information. Should you have questions, contact the Central Office Division of Highway Design, or if you need technical assistance related to the spreadsheet, email KYTC CAD support at the email address on the screen.